They're overlapping the tabs on this, so you're going to have a tendency for these to not be straight. What I consider the most important is to get these straight, and if you have to build up a puddle of solder in there to come up to the tabs, several of them are touching, some are up a little, but that's if you try to get them all down, you're just beating yourself in the head trying to get everything perfect here. Just primarily focus on getting these two pipes coming out straight and parallel. That's the primary goal. Solder it all together at once. Everything's in there. I'm applying heat to the bottom, and I'm moving it back and forth between the 1/2-inch tubing and the 3/4 tube, and applying heat to the bottom of the cap. I usually start, I'm applying heat in this region here, but I usually that's where I start, and then I work my way around. I pile it on liberally, and then you can go ahead and hit it along this ridge here, and it'll get you a good connection all the way around. And that's a done deal. Let it cool, and then we'll add the components that Allison made up for us a little bit ago. Assembly of the doubler section. When we made this, we had some solder run through. It's not something you desire, but it's something that's unavoidable at times. So I'm going to use the angle grinder with a sanding disc on it and knock that off. You got to be careful with the sanding disc. It's really aggressive, and it will eat the copper off pretty quick. Okay, we use these Scotch-Brite pads a lot for prepping for a solder joint. It's a little more flexible than the emery cloth for getting in tight spots like this. Next thing I need to do is prep the inside of the components that I'm going to be attaching to this. The female ends.
You done with that?
Yeah.
Well, this is
Alright, on the doubler section, of course this is going to come in left side, and we're going to have to rotate this to bring this in close to the edge here. And I always, if you're facing the front of it, I would rotate it in a counterclockwise direction in order to have this coming out the back side. You could do it either way. It has nothing to do with the functionality of the still, but for our purposes of packaging, I do put them out the back side. And to get that in position, I'll stick this piece in just temporarily, or any piece of 1/2-inch pipe. And that way, once you've rotated, you want to rotate it to where this is touching. And then you can go ahead and take this out carefully to not move the part you just positioned. So now you've got this part positioned, and so you're going to have to rotate this to get it in line. And what we'll do is bring this around and run a straight edge across the center of this pipe, and the center of this. And you have to look straight down on it, so I'm going to turn it towards me so I can see what I'm doing here. and you can see that you've got a straight line. Well, I can't get in front of the camera and show you this. I don't know if I've got the straight edge positioned or not, but that's what you want.
Okay, you want to make sure that everything is held up by something, because the way these happen is that the heat just goes everywhere and things do fall out.
Okay, so as you can see, well, maybe you can't see, I'm going to point out the bottom of this U is sitting on top of this vise plate, and this one's clamped. But on the initial setup, make sure you have these fittings up tight against the bottom of the cap before you go to solder them. This is the 18-inch piece of 3-inch pipe that goes onto the here. We're going to prep the end of it. I'm only going to show prepping the end of this 3-inch pipe one time, but you have to do it on every connection, of course. You want to get any burr that's from the cut taken off on the lip, and then you want to go down about the distance of the cap. You can mark it if you want how far down it's going to go. It's a good idea until you get a good feel for how far down you have to sand it. If you sand it down too far, that sandpaper is going to the sanded surface is going to look bad on your finished still. This is, I know with the width of this sandpaper I've got, I just go about a 1/4 inch past the edge, and that's about how far it needs to be. Next, you need to prep the inside of the cap. You want to make sure you don't have any burrs in here or any solder, anything at all will really restrict putting this on and make the job a lot tougher. We need to go ahead and get flux on both surfaces. Just slide that down on there. Make sure it goes straight. If you get it cocked any at all, it's not going to want to go on. And also, sometimes these caps will get deformed from being in the vise, and then you really have to wrestle them on. That one there slid on all right. Sometimes you have to hammer them on. If I would have had to have hammered this on, I would have gotten it out of the vise, because then you'd scar up the sides of this. Actually, I don't clamp it for the soldering, because if you just set it on the vise, you'll have less heat transfer to the vise, which means it'll take you less time to solder the component. And once again, I'm going to show soldering this 3-inch component. You can see I'm applying heat to this part and to this part. Both of them have to be up to temperature. There you go, it's flowing in. I don't keep the heat on it after I get it flowing. I apply heat and get it off of it. If you get it too hot, it will keep the solder from sticking to it. There you go, it's flowing right on around now. Wherever I stop at, before I apply solder again, I'll put the heat to it, and as soon as that solder is liquid again, get some more solder on it, let it flow in, and I just work my way on around in that fashion. And now I'll go in this direction. Once it connects to where I had been, I make sure that where I had stopped liquefies and runs together with what I'm adding. That's it. Done deal. The rest of this pipe will be added after the still's completion, because the alignment is critical with the other fittings. Assembly of the reflux section now, and I have this angle gauge I've made. They're simple to make. If you cut a square piece where the sides are all equal in length, you can draw a line from corner to corner, measure center points on all four sides, draw a line across. That'll give you your 45-degree increments all the way around, and then you can draw your 3-inch circle. It's real important to have this circle centered. It would be to buy a compass, stick the needle in here, and go out 3 inches and make your circle. To mark this for drilling the holes, you set it on the gauge as such, and you're going to have 2 holes drilled into this 90 degrees apart. So you'll get 2 marks 90 degrees apart. These will be at the top, so you will be inverting this for the assembly, and the one from the top left goes in 3 inches. That's your 7/8 hole for the 3/4 tube, and the one on the front goes in 4 inches for the 5/8 hole for the 1/2 inch tube. Alright, the one on the front, I've got this set for 4 inches. I not only kind of touch the square up against the bottom of the pipe, but just in case if your cut wasn't exact, which ours are good, but if you also want to make sure that you're running parallel to the sides of the pipe. And then I'll on this 4-inch one on the front, I mark a line the full length again, and we'll be using this line later in the assembly process for alignment. Right here will be 1 hole, and then we'll go in from this one 3 inches, 1, 2, 3, and I just put a dot there. Take a center punch to each of these holes. Move this gauge. Brass face plates on the vise here to keep from marring the copper. Even though a step drill will go through, it's quicker and easier to go ahead and drill your 1/4 inch guide hole, 1/4 inch bit. Alright, this is the one that's 3 inches down. It's the one that goes all the way through. I have a 7/8 step bit. Recommended you use earplugs doing this. It'll definitely cause ear damage. I need to drill the other hole. Alright, this one is for the 1/2 inch pipe, so you don't go all the way through. It's just like when we drilled the bottom of the cap. You'll go down. Just make sure you don't take it too far. There we go. The drilling portion's complete. I've already prepped a couple of these short stubs. 1/2 inch tube and 9/16. They're splayed out, prepped on the outside. The burrs ground off on the corner. And I don't know if you can see down in there or not, but there's a lot of copper material that has to be taken off the burr from drilling through. I've got a die grinder with a 3-inch extension on the end, a grinding stone. Again. And, alright, now I'm going to be sticking these parts through from the inside, but before I do that, I want to make sure they're going to go, in case I have to file this out in it. Yeah, that's a real tight fit, so you can take a rat tail file and go through there, or you can use an air tool. Oh, but I think I got it reamed out pretty good there. Yeah, alright, that goes through. Something else I do to open them up sometimes. I've got my 1/2 inch tool here that I use for sizing. It's actually just a piece of 1/2-inch tubing. I'll stick it through, kind of wall it around a little bit, and that'll open the hole up. Now I'm going to apply the flux to these tabs that are sticking out, and apply flux to the inside of the hole, and back on the inside of the pipe, a large area around the hole where the tabs will be adhering to. And this part, just come through from the inside, such. You don't, I guess you'd use needle nose pliers to hang onto the tab with and get back here and get it started. All you have to do is get them started like that. And then this is where this 1-inch piece of pipe really comes in nice on this component. I beat it all the way around where the tabs will actually conform to the radius of the inside diameter. They should come out straight in both axes, but if the cuts you made in there for splaying it out are different length to where that'll cause it to come out at an angle or whatever, you got to make sure you address that and get them good and straight coming out before you solder. Parallel to the ground level, and with the tube coming directly out the bottom. Okay, to solder these, I'm going to apply the heat to the outside of the pipe from the bottom up, and I'm just working the tip of that flame around the outside of that tube that goes through, and sometimes it goes up through the tube. That's not a problem at all. There we go. I'm starting to get solder flow. Okay, I'm going to back the heat off until my solder quits melting here. Okay, I'm going to get some more heat on there and get the solder back to the back side of that splayed out area. Now that one's done. I'm going to let it sit for a few seconds to make sure that the solder sets up. It takes that 3-inch pipe a little while to lose its heat. Continuing with the reflux section, and I went ahead and soldered in the other 1/2-inch pipe in the identical fashion that I soldered this one in, and from the inside, and I don't know how well that shows up, but you can see inside there where the tabs have plenty of solder on them. And then I'm going to pass this off to Allison and let her do her thing with soldering the fittings on. She's our small soldering expert here, resident expert.
Okay. What you need is the 1/2-inch pipe adapter and the 3/4. And it don't really matter which one you start with first, but you gotta prep the inside. And you gotta prep the outside of this, which even if you prepped it before, it's always a good idea to kind of give a little something something.
This piece is still extremely hot, so you can see the flux is just running right off. That's not an issue.
Okay, now the way I do this is I do it upside down because you want the flux to flow down. But the problem with some of them is that they're too loose, and that when you heat them up, they fall off. And I clamp it down. Then I use just something flat, and you can try to, and that holds it on a flat surface. Which, if you had like a piece of wood at the right height, you could do that or anything. Now, just like with the doubler pipe. The pipe adapters, you don't want to get solder on the threads, but you gotta be kind of careful. And sometimes the solder that you use from the inside will flow down, so sometimes you hardly have to put any on here.
Build the whole thing.
Okay, you might want to give it a second to make sure that it's holding. look inside the threads, make sure you don't have any solder. Which I don't. Now, I don't know if you can see or not, but a lot of times when you know it's gone all the way through, you can see a tiny ring of solder on the inside, which I see it on here. And that means it's gone all the way through.
The other one's done identically the same way. Alright, I'm going to set up a little laser pointer rig here that we use for marking the bells. This is the bell that we'll be placing on top of the reflux section, and while this is set up, we'll go ahead and mark the bell for the